Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Sergeant Matthew "Matt" Kerrigan had seen his fair share of war zones. He had fought on multiple continents, in conditions that ranged from blistering deserts to freezing mountain ranges. His squad had been through hell and back, yet nothing had prepared him for the tension he felt now. It wasn't the enemy they had to worry about. It was the eyes on them. Matt sat in the cramped communications room of the forward operating base, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The mission was critical, an extraction mission for a high-ranking target behind enemy lines. But something felt off. The intelligence reports had all been correct, the road had been cleared, and the team was ready to move out. Yet Matt couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them, watching him. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Matt had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming. He glanced at the clock. The mission was set to launch in under an hour. His team was assembling, ready to board the transport vehicles. But something was wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it. And then the moment he least expected, the realization hit him. The op was compromised. Matt stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He needed to speak to Captain Ramirez. It couldn't wait. But as he stepped out of the room, he was greeted by the familiar face of Lieutenant Sophia Reyes, his right-hand officer, who had served with him for years. She had the same worried look on her face. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked quietly, falling into step beside him. Matt didn't need to answer. The unease was palpable. There was something in the air, something he couldn't name. Something had changed. "We're being watched," Matt said flatly. He didn't need to explain further. Reyes knew exactly what he meant. She nodded, her expression hardening. "I've been getting strange signals on the comms. Someone is monitoring us." Matt felt his pulse quicken. "The mission is compromised," he muttered. "We need to act fast." They made their way to Captain Ramirez's office, where the rest of the team had gathered. Matt could see the tension in their eyes. They were all waiting for the briefing. But Matt knew better. The briefing wouldn't matter if they were walking into a trap. As they entered the office, Ramirez turned to face them, his expression guarded. "Sergeant Kerrigan, Lieutenant Reyes. What's the issue?" Matt wasted no time. "We've been compromised. The op is a setup." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "I don't know yet, sir, but I can feel it," Matty said, his voice low but urgent. "The mission was supposed to be clean, but someone's been watching us, tracking our every move. We need to abort or we're walking straight into an ambush." The room fell silent. The weight of Matt's words hit everyone like a freight train. Ramirez met his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, Matt saw uncertainty in his captain's eyes. "Aboard?" Ramirez repeated, his voice tense. "We can't. The target is too important. We have our orders." "Orders be damned," Matt snapped. "This isn't about following protocol. It's about survival. If we don't pull out now, we won't make it past the extraction point." Captain Ramirez's eyes flicked to the map on the wall, where the operation route had been marked in red. He clenched his jaw, his mind clearly racing. Finally he spoke, his voice firm but conflicted. "We're not abandoning this mission," he said, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. "But we'll change the plan. We'll be more cautious. We'll take a detour around the primary route. You'll lead a small team through the secondary exit. Reyes, you and the rest of the squad will head out first to secure the perimeter." Matt nodded. "We need to move fast, no delays. If they've already got eyes on us, they'll be ready for our next move." "Agreed," Ramirez replied, his face hardening. "You know what to do. Get to the extraction point, then wait for our signal." As Matt and Reyes left the captain's office, Matt's mind raced. The decision to change the route was a good one, but it was also dangerous. The enemy could have planted traps along the secondary route. And if they had truly compromised the mission, there was no telling how much they knew. But as he looked around at the team, their faces filled with determination, he knew they wouldn't back down. This was their job. This was what they trained for. The convoy rolled out just before dusk, the convoy vehicles moving through the desolate, rocky terrain. The sky was darkening quickly, the first stars beginning to appear, but Matt's mind was elsewhere. He kept scanning the horizon, waiting for the first sign that the enemy was closing in. Reyes sat beside him, her eyes sharp as she watched the surrounding hills. The hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the air, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Both of them knew this mission could go sideways at any moment. "Think they'll try to hit us on the way out?" Reyes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matt kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I'm sure of it." As they reached the halfway point to the extraction point, the convoy came to an abrupt halt. Matt's heart stopped. In the distance, a massive explosion erupted, sending a plume of dust and smoke into the air. "Contact!" someone shouted from the rear of the convoy. Matt leaped out of the vehicle, adrenaline flooding his veins. The enemy had set the trap. They were already here. The convoy had been ambushed. "Reyes, take the team and push forward. Secure that high ground!" Matt shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. But before they could move, a voice crackled over the comms, sending a chill down Matt's spine. "Sergeant Kerrigan," the voice said, distorted but clear. "You were right. We've been watching you." Matt's blood ran cold. They had anticipated every move. This was no ordinary mission, and it was far from over. The explosion had barely died down when the first wave of enemy soldiers descended from the hills like a storm. They were fast, coordinated, their movements precise. Matt had seen this kind of tactic before. This wasn't a standard assault. This was an ambush, and it was designed with one thing in mind: to trap them. "Move out now!" Matt shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He pushed forward, grabbing Reyes by the arm and pulling her toward the vehicle. "We need to get off the road, now!" The team moved quickly, but the enemy was already surrounding them. The sound of gunfire filled the air, deafening, as the squad spread out, returning fire. Matt's pulse raced, but his mind remained sharp. The squad had trained for situations like this, but this was different. There was something unsettling about the way the enemy had closed in, the way everything felt too planned, too perfect. Matt's eyes darted to the ridge above them. The enemy had the high ground. They were set up with heavy firepower, and they knew the terrain like the back of their hand. "We need cover," Matt growled. "Reyes, take your team to the left flank. We'll provide suppressing fire." Reyes nodded, her face grim as she signaled to her squad. They moved quickly, weaving through the rocks and debris as bullets ricocheted off the ground around them. Matt stayed behind, keeping his focus on the enemy forces. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves, and then opened fire. His shots were calculated, each one aimed, each one purposeful. But as the enemy forces started to retreat, Matt realized something that made his stomach drop. They weren't retreating in defeat. They were regrouping. "They're setting up for something," Matt muttered under his breath. "Stay alert. Don't let them bait us." The battle raged on for what felt like hours. Matt's squad held their position, taking out enemy soldiers one by one, but it was clear the ambush was just the beginning. The enemy was testing their resolve, waiting for them to make a mistake. Matt's radio crackled to life, and he immediately grabbed it. "This is Kerrigan. Report." It was Reyes on the other end, her voice steady but strained. "We're taking fire from the left, but we've got them pinned down. We're holding the line for now." "Good," Matt replied, but his mind was still racing. They had to get to the extraction point, had to finish the mission. But something didn't feel right. The enemy's tactics, their movements, their precision, it was like they knew their every move. "I'm heading your way," Matt said, snapping his radio off. He turned to his squad. "We're moving to Reyes's position. Stay sharp, everyone." But as they began to move out, the radio crackled again, this time with a voice that made Matt's blood run cold. "Sergeant Kerrigan," the voice said, calm and mocking, "you've made a lot of noise, but I hope you understand the position you're in. You'll never make it out of here." The voice was distorted, but Matt recognized it immediately. It was the same voice from earlier, the one that had warned him over the comms. "Who the hell are you?" Matt demanded, his grip tightening on his weapon. The voice chuckled. "You can call me Watcher. I've been keeping an eye on you and your team for some time now. Every move you've made, every plan you've set, I've been there. And I've been waiting for you to make this mistake." Matt's stomach tightened. They had been playing right into Watcher's hands. This wasn't just a mission gone wrong. It was a game, and they were the pawns. "You think you can stop me?" Matt growled. "You think this is over?" The voice responded coolly. "Oh no, it's just begun. Your team will be the first to fall, but you'll be last, Sergeant. You're the one I want to see fail the most." The line went dead. A sense of urgency hit Matt like a freight train. They weren't just facing enemy soldiers. They were facing someone who had been manipulating their every move from the shadows. The mission was a lie. The mission had always been a trap. "Reyes, fall back! We're not heading to the extraction point," Matt ordered, his voice cutting through the radio. "What? Why?" Reyes responded, confusion in her voice. "We've been set up," Matt said, his mind working fast. "We've got to move in a different direction. They're expecting us at the extraction point. We need to get ahead of them." "Roger that," Reyes replied, her tone hardening. "We're shifting positions now." Matt's squad shifted tactics, moving in a different direction, away from the preset extraction point. The weight of their decision hung heavily in the air, but it was the only choice they had. They moved quickly, dodging enemy fire as they worked their way toward the forest, hoping to lose their pursuers in the dense trees. But the further they went, the more the feeling of being watched pressed down on Matt. He couldn't shake it. Someone knew exactly where they were going. The moment Matt turned to make a command, a crackling sound broke through the trees. A figure appeared in the distance, tall, dark, and unmistakably human. Matt's heart skipped a beat as the figure raised its weapon. "Ambush!" Matt shouted, pushing his team into action. But before they could move, a bright flash filled the sky, blinding them for a moment. The sound of a helicopter's blades whirred in the distance, growing louder. "This is it," Matt muttered. "We're not alone anymore." The enemy had backup. Someone had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The trap had closed in around them, and now they had no choice but to face the unknown enemy head-on. The helicopter hovered above, its rotors kicking up dust and debris as it blocked out the moonlight. Matt could see the silhouette of soldiers lining the perimeter, closing in from all sides. It wasn't just a trap. They had been surrounded. "Take cover!" Matt shouted, pulling his squad into the nearest group of rocks and trees. The gunfire started immediately, the sharp cracks of bullets cutting through the air. Matt didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon and returned fire, aiming for the enemy's positions in the trees. His heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding his veins, but his mind was clear. There was no room for mistakes now. If they were going to survive this, they had to fight smart. "Reyes, take your team to the left flank," Matt ordered, his voice steady even as bullets flew overhead. "We need to move fast. We can't stay here long." Reyes nodded, signaling her team to move. They dashed through the underbrush, disappearing into the trees as Matt and the rest of the squad laid down suppressing fire. But despite their efforts, the enemy was relentless. The helicopter above hovered like a predator, its searchlights sweeping the ground, illuminating every movement. Matt's thoughts raced. They were trapped, but they still had one advantage: surprise. The enemy was confident, perhaps too confident that they had the upper hand. That was their mistake. "Jenkins, take the grenade launcher and hit the helicopter's tail rotor. We need to ground that thing," Matt ordered, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the battlefield. Jenkins, one of the most experienced members of Matt's squad, nodded, his face set in determination. He sprinted to a nearby position, setting up the launcher and taking aim. The sound of the launcher firing echoed in the night, and seconds later, a loud explosion tore through the air. The helicopter's tail rotor exploded in a shower of sparks, sending the aircraft spiraling out of control. The helicopter crashed into the trees, its engines sputtering as it hit the ground. But the crash wasn't the end. The enemy soldiers, now disoriented by the loss of their air support, began to scatter. But it was too late. More soldiers poured out of the woods, this time with heavier armor, making their way toward Matt's squad. "We need to move now!" Matt shouted. The trap had been sprung, but they hadn't been completely caught yet. There was still time to turn the tide. The countdown had begun, and it was either fight or die. The mission had turned into a nightmare, and as the team pushed through the dense forest, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The further they went, the tighter the grip of unease became. The enemy was still out there, but they weren't engaging head-on anymore. They were playing a different game, one that was far more dangerous. "Jenkins, Reyes, keep your heads on a swivel," Matt muttered, his eyes scanning the trees. "We're not alone." They had changed their course after the initial ambush, opting to take a more concealed route through the forest. The terrain was rough, steep hills, tangled underbrush, but it was the best way to avoid the enemy's traps. The plan was to make it to the extraction point through a secondary route, but Matt knew that wouldn't be enough. They had to outsmart the enemy. They had to take control. Reyes, walking beside him, looked up. "Do you think they're tracking us?" Matt nodded grimly. "It's the only thing that makes sense. They're too coordinated, too patient." "Then why aren't they closing in?" Jenkins asked, his voice tight with frustration. "They want us to keep moving," Matt said, his voice low and measured. "They're letting us think we're in control, but they're leading us somewhere, a place we don't want to go." As the team continued their silent march through the trees, Matt's mind raced. The mission had gone wrong from the start, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the whole operation had been a setup from the beginning. They weren't just after the weapon, they were after them, and Matt couldn't figure out why. The crackling sound of static suddenly came through Matt's comms, making him freeze in his tracks. "Sergeant Kerrigan," the voice on the other end said, distorted but clear. It was the same voice from earlier, the one that had warned him over the comms. "You're running out of time. We've been watching your every move. You're too late to stop this." The voice sent a chill down Matt's spine. "What the hell do you want?" he demanded, his fingers tightening on his weapon. "You'll find out soon enough," the voice replied coldly. "But first, you'll need to face the consequences of your actions." Before Matt could respond, the line went dead. His gut tightened. The feeling of being trapped, of being watched, was no longer paranoia. They had been on the enemy's radar for longer than they'd realized. "Who the hell was that?" Jenkins muttered, his eyes scanning the trees nervously. Matt didn't answer. He already knew. The voice was too familiar. They were being hunted, and the enemy wasn't just soldiers. They were something else. Something far more dangerous. They had no choice but to keep moving. The longer they stayed in one place, the more vulnerable they became. But as they trekked deeper into the forest, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The team had been compromised, and now, the only way out was forward. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps, crunching the leaves behind them, made Matt whip around. He motioned for his squad to take cover, dropping behind the nearest tree. He could hear the rustling getting closer, too close for comfort. "They're here," Matt whispered. "Get ready." The enemy had tracked them down. They had no time to wait for reinforcements, no time for a tactical retreat. It was now or never. They had to fight. A figure emerged from the underbrush, tall and confident. Matt's heart stopped when he saw who it was. It was the soldier from before, the one who had been tracking them. He wore a black mask, and his eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating malice. "Matt Kerrigan," the soldier said, his voice chillingly familiar. "Did you really think you could escape?" Matt's fingers tightened around his weapon. "I'm not running anymore." "You should have kept running," the soldier said, stepping closer. "Now, you're going to pay for it." The soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the unmistakable sound of gunfire erupted from the trees, striking the soldier down with a single shot. The force of the impact sent the soldier crashing to the ground, lifeless. Matt's team stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. "Who the hell shot him?" Jenkins asked, his voice barely a whisper. From the shadows, a new figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in tactical gear. It was a woman, her face hidden behind a helmet, but there was something about her presence that commanded attention. "I did," she said coolly, lowering her weapon. "And you're lucky I did." Matt's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, pulling off her helmet to reveal her face. Her features were sharp, determined, and hardened by experience. "Sergeant Elena Carter. Special Ops. I've been watching you, Sergeant Kerrigan. You've been in way over your head." Matt's mind raced. What the hell is going on here? Elena didn't answer immediately. She surveyed the area, ensuring no one else was around. "You've been targeted by something much bigger than you think. The mission was never about the weapon. It was about eliminating you." Matt's mind spun. "Eliminating me? Why?" "Because you're a threat," Elena said, her voice hardening. "You've uncovered too much. And now the people behind this are getting desperate." Before Matt could respond, a series of explosions rocked the ground beneath them. The forest shook, and the sound of distant gunfire reverberated through the trees. The enemy was closing in, and this time, they weren't just watching. "They've found us," Elena said urgently. "We need to move. Now." The team scrambled into action, but as they moved forward, Matt couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation settle over him. The mission was no longer just about survival. It was about uncovering the truth and stopping the enemy before they took everything. The forest was thick with tension as Matt and his team moved through the dense woods. Every step felt like a gamble, each breath sharp in his chest. The mission had already turned upside down, and now the enemy wasn't just attacking, they were watching, waiting, moving like phantoms in the trees. The weight of their eyes, cold, calculating, hung over Matt like a storm cloud, ready to break. "Keep your heads down," Matt ordered, his voice a low growl that carried through the static of the comms. He kept his pace steady, eyes scanning the terrain around him. But inside, he felt a knot tightening with each step. The ambush, the enemy soldiers, the loss of control. It all felt too orchestrated, too perfect. Reyes, ever the steady force, moved alongside him. She had a sharpness in her eyes, like she'd already assessed the situation and was just waiting for confirmation that she wasn't wrong. "What do you think they're after, sir?" she asked quietly. Matt didn't answer at first. He couldn't afford to be distracted, but her question cut through the noise of his thoughts. What were they after? If the ambush had been a setup, if they had already known their every move, then why keep pushing them forward? What was the end game? "They want us to move," Matt finally said, his voice tight. "They want us to walk into their hands." "Then why don't we stop?" Reyes asked, her voice flat but laced with curiosity. "Because they already know what we're doing. If we stop, they win." Matt's gaze hardened as he looked toward the horizon. "We don't have the luxury of waiting." As they pressed on, Matt's thoughts lingered on the strange calm that had settled over the mission. The enemy was too coordinated, too prepared. They weren't just waiting for Matt and his team to make a mistake. They were leading them. Every decision they made seemed to be anticipated. Every move they took, the enemy was one step ahead. Matt's mind flashed back to the communication from General Davis earlier. "The enemy's playing a game with you. You're the pawns." He gritted his teeth. That realization had stung, and now it was beginning to feel like a bitter truth. They weren't just walking into an ambush. They were walking into a trap that had been set from the very start. Someone had been pulling the strings, someone who had been watching them all along. The deeper they moved into the forest, the more Matt's senses screamed that something wasn't right. The gunfire from earlier had stopped, but it wasn't peace that had settled over the battlefield. It was silence. A silence that made the air feel thick with danger. Matt's hand instinctively went to the radio on his chest, adjusting the frequency. "This is Sergeant Kerrigan. Do we have eyes on the extraction point?" The response came through crackling static. "Negative, Sergeant. The extraction point has been compromised. We've lost contact with the rest of the squad." Matt's heart skipped a beat. The worst-case scenario was happening before his eyes. Not only had they been compromised, but the rest of the squad had gone dark. What the hell had happened? "Reyes, Jenkins, take the west side. I'm going east," Matt commanded, moving quickly, his voice calm despite the panic creeping in. "We need to find the others." The squad moved out, but the oppressive silence made every step feel like they were being led into the lion's den. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound was the crunch of their boots against the earth. They moved in perfect formation, but Matt couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the enemy was waiting for the right moment to strike. Just as they reached a clearing in the forest, Matt froze. He had seen something, or rather, someone, moving on the ridge above them. A figure, cloaked in shadows, standing still as if waiting for them to make a move. Matt's heart raced, his instincts kicking into overdrive. "Get down!" he hissed, motioning for the squad to take cover behind the trees. But it was too late. The figure raised a weapon, and before anyone could react, the sharp crack of a sniper rifle rang out, slicing through the quiet forest air. The shot missed, but the enemy was close. Too close. "They've got a sniper!" Matt shouted, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "Move! Move!" The squad took off running, diving for cover as another shot rang out, narrowly missing them. But Matt's mind wasn't on the sniper. It was on the figure, the one who had been watching them. They knew they were there. They had been waiting for them. And the trap had just sprung. The sniper's shots echoed through the trees as Matt and his squad scrambled for cover. The forest was thick, and every tree felt like a potential hiding spot for the enemy. But as they darted through the underbrush, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Again. "Jenkins, Reyes, get to higher ground," Matt barked, keeping his voice low but firm. "We need to find where that shot came from." The enemy sniper was good. Too good. The first shot had missed, but the next one wouldn't. Matt knew they had to get ahead of the sniper, move faster than they'd ever moved before, or they wouldn't make it out alive. The squad moved as quickly and quietly as possible, dodging trees and scrambling through the underbrush. They were getting closer to the ridge, but Matt could already feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "We're almost there," Matt said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Stay sharp." But as they neared the top of the ridge, something happened that Matt didn't expect. The sniper stopped firing. "Why would they stop?" Jenkins asked, his voice tight with confusion. "They're not done with us yet," Matt said, his mind working quickly. "They're waiting for us to make the next move." As they reached the top of the ridge, Matt's stomach twisted. The sniper wasn't the only threat. A group of soldiers, heavily armed and organized, was waiting for them, emerging from the shadows like ghosts. "Sergeant Kerrigan," the leader of the enemy soldiers said, stepping forward. "We've been expecting you." Matt's heart skipped a beat. "Who the hell are you?" The soldier smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "The ones who've been pulling the strings, Sergeant. The ones who've been watching you." Matt's grip on his weapon tightened. He knew the enemy had been waiting for him. But now they were face to face with the ones who had been behind it all. And they weren't done yet. Matt and his squad were outgunned, surrounded, and trapped. But they weren't ready to surrender, not yet. The soldiers who had cornered them were well equipped, their movements deliberate, but Matt could see something else in their eyes. There was a cold, calculated malice there, something that made Matt realize that they weren't just mercenaries or enemy soldiers. These were people who had been trained for one purpose: to ensure the success of a mission at any cost. The leader of the group, a man with sharp features and a cold smile, stepped forward. He was taller than the others, his uniform immaculate. His eyes scanned Matt's team with disdain. "You've done well to make it this far, Sergeant Kerrigan," the man said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But this is where it ends." Matt's pulse quickened. The trap had closed, and now they were facing the enemy who had been orchestrating the entire operation. He had known they were being watched, but now the truth hit him like a sledgehammer. The stakes had just risen. "What's the end game?" Matt demanded, his voice steady despite the growing danger. "Why all this? Why the weapon?" The leader laughed softly, shaking his head. "You think you're fighting for survival, Sergeant, but you're part of something much larger than yourself. This weapon, this is just the beginning. What we're after isn't just power, it's control. And you've been a part of our plan from the start." Before Matt could respond, the sound of footsteps approaching from behind interrupted him. The ground rumbled as if something heavy was moving. And then, the helicopter appeared, a massive military-grade transport helicopter, hovering above them like a predator. The doors opened, and more soldiers poured out, surrounding them. Matt's heart sank as he saw the new arrivals. This wasn't just an ambush. This was an execution. But just as the soldiers closed in, a new voice came through Matt's comms. "Sergeant Kerrigan, do you have a plan?" It was Elena, and she wasn't alone. The helicopter's rotors roared in the air, its massive frame casting a shadow over the battlefield as soldiers poured out like a swarm of locusts. They were outnumbered and surrounded. Matt's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained focused. His team wasn't giving up, not without a fight. Elena's voice crackled through his comms again. "Sergeant, I've got a team in position. You need to hold the line for another few minutes. We're coming in hot." Matt's pulse quickened. They had been cornered by the enemy forces, but Elena was right. Reinforcements were on the way. If they could just survive long enough, they might have a chance. But every second felt like a lifetime. "Reyes, Jenkins, take the left flank. Keep them pinned down," Matt shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "The rest of you, with me. We push forward." He didn't wait for a response. He didn't have time. The enemy was closing in, and every movement had to count. The squad shifted positions, moving quickly and silently as the enemy soldiers advanced. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, the ground littered with the remnants of the ongoing battle. The tension was suffocating, but Matt's resolve was unwavering. They had come this far. They couldn't lose now. As they moved toward the enemy's line, the gunfire intensified. Matt's team was doing their best to hold the enemy back, but they were heavily outnumbered. The soldiers around them were relentless, and every step forward felt like they were being pushed back. Matt ducked behind a rock, narrowly avoiding a bullet that whizzed past his ear. He peered over the edge, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The enemy had fortified their position, but they were underestimating Matt's team. They had been trained for situations like this. They just had to outsmart the enemy. "Reyes!" Matt shouted, his voice hoarse with adrenaline. "Set up a perimeter. We need to give Elena more time." Reyes nodded, signaling to the rest of the squad. They quickly moved into position, taking up defensive spots and returning fire with precision. The enemy was relentless, but Matt's team was holding their ground. They weren't going to let the enemy take this from them. But Matt's mind kept drifting back to the man who had been watching them, the one who had orchestrated the whole operation. He wasn't just an enemy soldier. He was something else. Something darker. As the battle raged on, Matt finally caught sight of him, the man who had been pulling the strings from the beginning. He stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. His posture was calm, like he was observing an experiment rather than a fight. Matt's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about the weapon anymore. This was about control. The man wasn't just after power. He was after something more. And now, Matt knew that the mission wasn't just about survival. It was about stopping him, whatever it took. "Who the hell is this guy?" Jenkins shouted as he fired a shot toward the man. But it was no use. The enemy. Commander had retreated behind the cover of his soldiers. "I don't know," Matt replied, his voice low with fury. "But we're going to find out." He motioned for his team to move forward, but before they could make their move, another explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The force of the blast knocked Matt off his feet, sending him crashing into the dirt. "Matt!" Reyes shouted, rushing to his side. "I'm fine," Matt said quickly, pushing himself up and brushing off the dust. "Keep moving. We're not done yet." But as he surveyed the battlefield, he realized something. The explosion had come from a new source, an ambush from the enemy's backup. The battle had escalated beyond anything they had prepared for. The enemy commander's voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the chaos. "You fought well, Sergeant Kerrigan," the voice said, filled with eerie calm. "But this game is over. The real mission begins now." Before Matt could respond, the enemy soldiers advanced again, this time in a coordinated assault from every direction. There was no more room to retreat. The trap had closed. Matt's heart raced as he realized what had just happened. They had walked into the final phase of the enemy's plan. The real war had begun, and it wasn't about the weapon anymore. It was about power, and the enemy was ready to take it all. "We've got to push through this," Matt muttered, his voice low. "There's no way out except forward." The final battle was upon them, and there was no turning back. Matt's squad was down to their last ounces of energy. The constant firefights, the ambushes, and the nonstop pursuit had drained them all, but they couldn't stop. Not yet. Not when they were this close to uncovering the truth. The air was thick with gunfire, the smoke from the explosions making it difficult to see. But through it all, Matt kept his focus. His eyes were locked on the enemy commander, the man who had been the mastermind behind everything they had been through. He was the one who had been controlling the entire mission from behind the scenes. Matt's hands were shaking from the adrenaline, but his grip on his weapon remained firm. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping the enemy before they could complete their mission. He had to end it. They had to end it. Matt and his squad advanced through the battlefield, their weapons raised, their bodies moving with practiced precision. The enemy commander was nearby. Matt could feel it. Every step forward brought them closer to the truth. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Then, just as they neared a large building, Matt's comms crackled again. "This is your last chance, Sergeant Kerrigan," the enemy commander's voice said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "You've made a lot of noise, but now it's time to face the consequences." Matt's stomach twisted as the door to the building ahead of them creaked open. The enemy commander was waiting. But as Matt stepped forward, something caught his eye. An unfamiliar symbol on the wall. It was a logo, a design he recognized from a past mission. The symbol belonged to an organization he had thought had been disbanded years ago. The pieces began to fall into place. "Get ready!" Matt shouted as his team moved forward, weapons raised. But before they could make a move, the lights in the building flickered and went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and then the unmistakable sound of footsteps filled the room. Someone was there. Someone Matt hadn't expected. The room was pitch black, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and the crackling of static from their comms. Matt's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. The enemy had set the trap. They had been watching them from the start, and now they were finally going to face the truth. "Who's there?" Matt called out, his voice echoing in the darkness. A figure stepped forward, silhouetted against the faint light from outside. It was the enemy commander, but it wasn't just him. Behind him stood another figure, one that Matt didn't recognize at first. But then, as the light shifted, he saw the face. It was Colonel Daniels. Matt's heart stopped. The man who had been pulling the strings all along, the man he had trusted, was standing right in front of him, his eyes cold and calculating. "You?" Matt whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "You've been behind this the entire time?" Daniels smiled, But it wasn't the smile of a man who had been defeated. It was the smile of a man who had won. "Surprised, Sergeant?" Daniel said softly. "You've been playing into my hands from the start. The weapon, the mission, everything. It was all part of a bigger plan. And now, you've helped me finish it." Matt's fingers tightened around his weapon. His heart was pounding, but his resolve was clear. Daniels had betrayed them, and now it was time to end it. "You've got one chance to walk away," Matt said, his voice low but steady. "I'm giving you the chance to surrender." Daniels laughed, but it was hollow. "You think you can stop me now? You've already lost." But Matt didn't hesitate. With a single motion, he raised his weapon and fired. The battle was over.